Chapter 1. On the eve of his wedding, Sincere Clark accidentally discovered that his girlfriend of 3 years, Victoria Rothwell, saw him only as a substitute for someone else. He didn't confront her. He simply called his parents and told them he wasn't going through with the marriage. For the next 2 weeks, Sincere stopped paying attention to anything Victoria did. He was trying to figure out an excuse to leave when, unexpectedly, a childhood friend of hers appeared, repeatedly using his own supposedly clever schemes to drive a wedge between him and Victoria. On the wedding day, the childhood friend once again used an excuse to lure Victoria away. Sincere smiled. This was exactly what he wanted. He took off his tuxedo and raced to the airport. He never looked back. "Dad, I'm not getting married. I'm running away from the wedding." His father's sigh came through the phone. "Weren't you just planning the wedding with Victoria the other day? Why so sudden?" A wave of pain washed over Sincere, but he forced himself to speak through the lump in his throat. "I've thought it through. She's not worth my time." Mr. Clark's voice held a hint of reproach. "You were the one who insisted on being with Victoria, even when we told you not to. You knew she was in love with your brother. Even if you're twins and have the exact same face, your personalities are different. Why did you have to put yourself through being his stand-in? Besides, your brother has been gone for so many years. Why are you still so fixated on this?" His mother took the phone from his father. "It's good that you're coming back. Sophia Miller from next door is back. Didn't you love playing with her when you were kids?" When Sincere finished the call and returned to the hospital room, it was filled with Victoria's friends, bustling with activity. Everyone had brought flowers and fruit to visit the injured Victoria. Only Sincere stood empty-handed, without so much as a bottle of water. Hearing the door open, everyone turned in unison to look at him. One of them frowned, a hint of displeasure in his voice. "You're Victoria's boyfriend, getting married next month. How could you not even bring a bouquet of flowers? Aren't you two getting married? Don't you care about your own future wife?" Sincere found it almost laughable. Victoria had just woken up after being in a coma for a week. For that entire week he had stayed by her bedside day and night, a fact everyone had witnessed, and now they were accusing him of not caring. A man was sitting by Victoria's bed, holding a small bowl and carefully feeding her porridge. The man looked familiar, a newly signed celebrity at her company, he thought. Ethan Shaw. Hearing the comments, Victoria's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Seeing Sincere's empty hands, a spark of anger ignited within her. "What took you so long to come see me?" Her words instantly silenced the rebuttal on the tip of Sincere's tongue. There was no point in arguing. He glanced coolly around the room, not answering her question. He took out Victoria's phone and handed it to the girl closest to him. "I just came to bring her phone." With that, Sincere turned and left the room without a hint of hesitation. A short while ago, Victoria and her friends had decided to go street racing on the winding mountain roads. Before she left, Sincere had tried to talk her out of it several times, but Victoria had impatiently pushed his hand away. "I know this road like the back of my hand. Just wait for me at the finish line." She tossed her phone at him and, amidst the laughter of her friends, joined the group on their motorcycles. At the sound of a whistle, 7 or 8 of them shot off. Unfortunately, Victoria lost control on a sharp turn and was thrown from her bike. By the time the ambulance arrived, she had already fallen into a coma. During her coma, Sincere never left her side, until the moment Victoria's phone, fully charged, turned on. A message popped up. It was from her best friend, Chloe Davis. "When are you going to tell Sincere the truth, that you're just using him as a substitute? It's not right to keep deceiving him like this." The fact that Victoria was in love with Sincere's brother was an open secret in their circle, and Sincere himself was no exception. After Caleb Clark went abroad, Sincere joined Victoria's company and became her capable assistant. It was then that Sincere discovered Victoria would buy a plane ticket every week to fly to the country where Caleb was. A year later, Victoria suddenly returned, completely heartbroken. She walked up to Sincere's desk, leaned in and asked him, "You like me?" Sincere's gaze darted away in a panic, his heart pounding like a drum. He looked at her face and nodded firmly. Victoria's lips curved into a faint smile as she stared at his face, lost in thought. The honk of a car horn snapped her back to reality. She extended a hand toward him. "Let's be together." Not long after, his parents called. Through tears, they gave him the news. Chapter 2. Caleb Clark was dead. He'd been robbed by a motorcycle gang abroad. When he refused to let go of his bag, they dragged him for over 100 feet, killing him on the spot. When the video was sent to Sincere's phone, his hand trembled as he pressed play. It started with the wail of police sirens as cars sped past, chasing the fleeing gang. Then, the scene abruptly shifted. The police sirens were replaced by the piercing sound of an ambulance. The camera panned to a long, shocking trail of blood on the ground. After the Clark family handled Caleb's funeral, Victoria acted as if nothing had happened, eating and sleeping as usual. Everyone said that the day Caleb left her to go abroad, she had already moved on. The rumor was so convincing that even Sincere had believed it. He never imagined that after all these years, she still hadn't let go of his brother. His hand, holding Victoria's phone, tightened. On a strange impulse, he opened her chat with Chloe. A heart-wrenching conversation stared back at him. "Chloe Davis, I don't like Sincere, but what you're doing isn't right. Victoria Rothwell, what's not right about it? He's the one who wanted to be by my side. I never begged him. Chloe Davis, Caleb treasured his little brother more than anything. If he knew you were playing with Sincere's feelings like this, he would never forgive you. Victoria Rothwell, the dead can't be brought back to life. Caleb will never know. Besides, I'm only marrying Sincere for the face that's identical to Caleb's." Chloe didn't reply again until a long time later, just minutes before Victoria's accident, when she sent that one fateful message. It was only in that moment that Sincere understood. Victoria had never forgotten his brother. She had agreed to marry him simply because of his face. When Sincere returned to the office, his colleagues swarmed him, gossiping and asking where he and Victoria planned to hold their wedding. Sincere forced a smile. "It might be postponed. Her condition isn't great right now. The doctor says she needs to rest." The crowd dispersed to their desks, looking disappointed. There were only 2 weeks left until the end of the year. 2 weeks was enough time for him to execute his plan. When he handed his resignation letter to the HR department, the colleague who took it looked puzzled. Then, as if realizing something, she smiled knowingly. "Assistant Clark, Miss Rothwell's rule against office romances must have been really tough on you." Sincere froze for a second, then immediately understood the implication. He was about to explain, but the colleague just stamped his resignation letter with a smile. "Don't forget to put in a good word for us with Miss Rothwell after you're married." The words of explanation died on his lips. It was better if fewer people knew he was leaving. He took the resignation letter from his colleague and walked towards Victoria's office. The moment the flimsy piece of paper landed on her desk, Sincere realized that all his grief had been spent the moment he saw those text messages. As he walked out of the office, he took one last look back at the space where he had worked alongside Victoria for 3 years. The beautiful moments they once shared flashed through his mind like a movie reel. At the hospital, Victoria waited and waited, but Sincere never returned. Growing impatient, she picked up her phone to call him, only to see the small red notification icon on her messaging app. She saw Chloe's reply, and instantly forgot all about finding Sincere. Sincere returned to the villa they shared and began to pack up everything he had accumulated over the years. Matching toothbrushes, matching slippers, matching pajamas. While packing, his elbow accidentally knocked over a picture frame on the bedside table. The frame hit the floor with a muffled thud, shattering the protective glass. A photo, too small for the frame, fell out from inside. As he turned to get a broom to clean up the mess, he caught a glimpse of something under the broken glass. It looked like there was more than one photo. Chapter 3. A heavy feeling sank in Sincere's chest, as if he already knew the answer. He carefully swept aside the broken glass and removed the frame. There, on the floor, lay 2 photographs. When he gently turned them over, he discovered that tucked behind the photo of him and Victoria was another one, a picture of his brother from college. Sincere held the 2 photos up, overlapping them against the harsh light from above. His brother's face perfectly replaced his own. He realized now that when that picture was taken, Victoria hadn't been looking at him at all. It was the first snow of winter that year. After seeing the photo, Sincere had complained, "You're not even looking at me. My legs went numb from squatting, and you were looking up at something else." Victoria had stared at the photo in the camera, lost in thought. After a long moment, she had smiled. "Was I? Let's take another one then." Sincere collapsed onto the floor. At that moment, he didn't even feel the shards of glass digging into his palms. He had thought that for at least one fleeting moment, Victoria had genuinely liked him. He never imagined that, even in that moment, she wasn't looking at him. His phone, lying nearby, suddenly rang. As he pushed himself up, the sharp pain in his hands brought him back to his senses. He struggled to his feet and answered the call. It was Chloe Davis. The background was noisy, and Sincere could barely make out what she was saying. He could only catch a few words which, pieced together, seemed to mean that Victoria was insisting on leaving the hospital to celebrate that young celebrity's birthday. Hearing this, he irritably grabbed some tissues to wipe the blood from his hands. Let her do what she wants. If she doesn't care about her own body, no one can convince her otherwise. There was a brief silence on the other end. Sincere quickly realized it was another test. For years in Victoria's circle, he had been a boyfriend in name only. Victoria loved to test his devotion, and she savored the sight of him worried and anxious for her. Now Sincere understood. It was all because his face looked so much like his brother's. When she saw that face, his face, filled with sorrow and concern for her, she could delude herself into feeling Caleb's worry. But Sincere was done playing this childish and cruel game. Chloe was momentarily stunned by his words, looking uncertainly at Victoria on the hospital bed. Victoria's face darkened as she threw back the covers and got out of bed. If he's not coming, fine. We'll go have fun without him. At her words, everyone in the room except Chloe cheered. Chloe started to say something else into the phone, but before she could, she realized the line had gone dead. The wedding was in 2 weeks, yet Victoria and Sincere hadn't sent out invitations, prepared wedding favors, chosen a dress, or booked a venue. Chloe couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for Sincere. Sincere found the first aid kit and began to disinfect and clean the wounds on his hands by himself. In the middle of it, he called a moving company. The movers were fast. A team of 12 people sorted and packed everything into boxes. 3 hours later, all of Sincere's belongings were loaded onto a truck. Sincere typed an address into his phone. Take everything on the truck to this address. After the movers left, Sincere picked up his packed suitcase and walked out into the yard. He deleted his fingerprint from the door lock and left the key under the doormat. Just as he finished, small snowflakes began to drift down from the sky. They landed on his coat, quickly melting into tiny, glistening droplets of water. A sharp ring shattered the silence. He pulled out his phone and saw a name on the screen. Victoria Rothwell. Chapter 4. He was surprised to see her name. In their 3 years together, Victoria had called him fewer than 10 times. She usually preferred to send concise, a few-word messages on the app. After a moment's hesitation, he answered, "The usual spot. Come over." Her voice was tinged with impatience, as if she was certain Sincere would come just like always. Sincere demurred. "I can't. I'm not feeling well, can't drink." There was a brief pause, and then her tone softened slightly. "I'm not asking you to drink. I just ran into a few executives here, and they want to talk to you about that project you were following up on." It was an offer he couldn't refuse. Even though Sincere had already resigned, the project was nearly complete, just one final push away from success. Afterward, he would receive a bonus according to the contract. How could he turn down a chance to make money? He quickly took a cab to the destination. The moment he pushed the door open, before he could even speak, someone hiding behind it shoved a handful of sticky cream in his face. The room erupted in laughter. The music in the karaoke bar was deafening. Someone set off a party popper, and the sounds of excited screams and popping noises exploded in Sincere's ears. After a moment of stunned silence, Sincere realized he had been played again. He slowly raised a hand to wipe the gooey cream from his face. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he saw Ethan Shaw walking toward him, holding a cake. Ethan held the cake out to him. "Sincere, it's my birthday today. Getting cream on my face is a tradition for me." "I hope you don't mind." Ethan's face was full of smug satisfaction. He had cleverly passed the prank off as a fun tradition. If Sincere lost his temper now, he'd be seen as the killjoy who couldn't take a joke. Sincere's gaze swept over the faces in the private room. Everyone had a thumb-sized smudge of cream on their face, even Victoria. Only he was covered in it, a white mess that wouldn't come off no matter how much he wiped. Sincere, with cream still clinging to his hair, turned to look at the woman sitting silently in the center of the room. "Where are they?" Victoria raised an eyebrow, her look of confusion seeming genuine. "Who?" Sincere glanced around and noticed that everyone was looking at him with expressions that were anything but friendly, mocking, disgusted, amused. He finally got it. Because he hadn't willingly played the fool today, Victoria had found another way to turn him into one. Sincere turned and left, heading for the nearest restroom to clean the cream off his face. But when he turned on the faucet, he belatedly remembered the bandages he had wrapped around his hands earlier that day. Seeing the cream mixed with the blood seeping through the bandages, he suddenly felt drained of all energy. He stood in front of the mirror and, with the last of his patience, unwrapped the bandages. When the icy water hit his skin, his patience ran out. He ignored the wounds and scrubbed his hands fiercely. Let it hurt. He needed the pain to wake him up completely. Back in the room, Victoria felt a sense of unease. The person next to her handed her a drink, but she pushed it away irritably. Chloe Davis, sitting beside her, saw through her turmoil. "Go get Sincere and bring him back. You should at least apologize." Victoria scoffed, suppressing the flicker of annoyance. "Apologize? Why should I apologize? He was late. Do you think the clients would just wait around for him? If it weren't for me, would that deal have even closed? He should be grateful, not giving me an attitude." Chloe was at a loss for words, but tried again. "But Sincere didn't know you closed the deal for him. He walked in, got a face full of cream, and still had the patience to ask where the clients were. And you just acted like you were pranking him. Who wouldn't be angry?" For once, Victoria actually listened to Chloe. She stood up awkwardly, smoothed out her dress, and picked up her phone from the table. As she walked out, she made an excuse to save face. "I'm just going out for some fresh air." Chapter 5. When Victoria found Sincere, he was asking a staff member if he could borrow a hairdryer. He had washed the cream out of his hair, but it wouldn't dry quickly, and it was freezing outside. One step out, and he'd turn into an ice sculpture. Sincere saw Victoria in his peripheral vision, but pretended not to notice. He just stood in front of the mirror, drying his hair, watching Sincere's stubborn back. Victoria suddenly felt that the person before her was different. She remembered how, in the past, whenever Sincere felt slighted by others, he would quietly sulk. But now, he was just calmly composing himself, not angry at all. She strode forward and, on her tiptoes, took the hairdryer from his hand. Sincere was startled by her action and pulled his hand away. "It's fine. It's almost dry." Victoria snatched the hairdryer back. As her cool fingertips brushed against his skin, Sincere instinctively flinched away. Noticing his reaction, Victoria asked, "What's wrong with you?" Sincere replied unnaturally, "Nothing, it just itches a little." Victoria, for once, offered an explanation. "My dad pulled some strings to get this celebrity signed. It's his birthday, so I had to do something." Sincere gave a low M&M, which in Victoria's mind signified understanding. Standing for so long was making her leg ache. A memory seemed to surface, and she suddenly said, "Also, about the wedding, I was neglectful. I've already had a factory make samples for the invitations and favors. And for our wedding attire, I've hired a famous international designer. He arrives the day after tomorrow. Do you think anything else is missing?" As she spoke, she watched Sincere's reflection in the mirror, hoping to see a look of anticipation on his face. But all Sincere felt was a headache. With every excuse and every delay from Victoria, he had long since lost the desire to marry her. That was why he planned to jilt her, to make her the laughingstock of the city. At that thought, Sincere chuckled. "Nothing's missing. You can handle the arrangements." Seeing him finally smile, Victoria nodded. Suddenly, she felt something strange on her hand. She loosened her grip on the hairdryer and saw that her palm was stained with blood. She thought for a moment, then discreetly glanced at Sincere's hands. His skin was pale and wrinkled from the water, but his palms were covered in blood, which was now dripping from his fingertips to the floor. She placed the hairdryer on the counter, her voice hesitant. "Your hand—" Sincere came back to his senses. In the mirror, he saw Victoria looking at him with an expression he'd never seen before. It seemed like concern. He forced a smile. "It's nothing. I just cut myself while cutting fruit." Hearing this, Victoria's tone became casual again. From now on, just have the staff do things like cutting fruit. What Victoria didn't know was that Sincere had already dismissed the staff. Some of them had sticky fingers. While he was at the hospital with her, they had stolen quite a few things from the house. If Sincere hadn't gone back to get something and noticed them acting suspiciously, the whole house would have been emptied. "Let me take you to the hospital to get that treated." Sincere was about to refuse when Chloe Davis's urgent voice called out from behind them. They both turned to see Chloe standing a short distance away, out of breath. She leaned against the wall, pointing back the way she came. "Victoria, Ethan, he..." Victoria quickly asked, "What's wrong with him?" Chloe swallowed hard, finally able to speak clearly. "He got into a fight with some people in the room. No one can stop him. You have to go see without a moment's hesitation." Victoria turned and ran toward the room. Just as Chloe was about to leave, Sincere stopped her. His voice was low and devoid of any warmth. "Chloe, I want to know about Ethan and Victoria's relationship." Chapter 6. Chloe stopped in her tracks but didn't turn around. After what felt like a long time, she sighed deeply and turned to face Sincere. "You could say they're like brother and sister. Over 20 years ago, the Shaw family went bankrupt. After that, Ethan came to live with the Rothwells, and he and Victoria grew up calling each other brother and sister. But we could all see that Ethan was in love with Victoria. He was working abroad, but he rushed back as soon as he heard about Victoria's accident. With Mr. Rothwell's help, Ethan was signed to the Rothwell family's entertainment company. Under their protection, his career path would be much smoother. Hearing this, Sincere understood a lot. No wonder Ethan could sit so brazenly by Victoria's bedside and feed her porridge. No wonder he could order someone to smash a cake in his face in front of everyone. No wonder Victoria, who was such a neat freak, had tolerated Ethan smearing cream on her face without exploding in anger. It was all because she had allowed it. After dealing with the situation with Ethan, Victoria suddenly remembered Sincere, whom she had left behind. She grabbed her coat, about to leave, when Ethan caught her by the wrist. She looked up and saw his hesitant expression. "Sis Vicky, since I came back, I've been renting an apartment, and I'm not really used to it. I was thinking of moving back home." Victoria glanced at the watch on her wrist and nodded casually. "If you really want to move back, I'll have someone get you a spare key. But Sincere and I are getting married. If there's a house you like, I'll buy it for you. Consider it a New Year's gift." Ethan was clearly displeased by her words, but he knew that pushing it now would only backfire. He had no choice but to agree. When Sincere received Victoria's call, he had just checked into a hotel and put down his luggage. Victoria's voice on the other end was anxious. "Where did you go?" Sincere calmly dodged her question. "What's up?" There was a second of silence, and then she said, "I can be discharged today. Will you come pick me up?" Sincere readily agreed. "Sure." After hanging up, Sincere took a cab to the hospital. Once everything was packed, Victoria stood at the hospital entrance with Sincere, holding her bags and shivering in the cold wind. She asked, puzzled, "You didn't drive?" Sincere nodded and was about to pull out his phone to call a car. To his surprise, Victoria didn't throw a fit like she used to. She just stood beside him, patiently waiting for the car to arrive. When they got home, Victoria waited for Sincere to open the door as usual. After a long wait, Sincere still hadn't moved. Meeting her gaze, Sincere quickly made an excuse. "I was in a hurry when I left and forgot my key." Victoria didn't suspect a thing. In her mind, Sincere was just a bit forgetful. The moment she stepped inside, Victoria felt that the house seemed empty, as if something was missing, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Finally, she looked around and then at Sincere. "Where's the staff?" Sincere placed her luggage in the living room. "They were stealing. I caught them and fired them." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "Good riddance to anyone with sticky fingers. We can just hire new people." Just then there was a knock at the door. Sincere was closest, so he went to open it. He was greeted by the sight of 7 or 8 suitcases. Ethan Shaw walked past Sincere, who was holding the door, and went straight to Victoria on the sofa. "Sis Vicky, why didn't you call me to pick you up from the hospital?" Victoria smiled and changed the subject. "Have you been reading the script for the new role the company arranged for you? You have some of the biggest names in the industry playing supporting roles. It all comes down to your performance now." Ethan, now sitting on the sofa, held his head high, a stark contrast to his easygoing demeanor in the private room earlier that afternoon. "I knew Uncle Rothwell was the best to me as soon as I got back. He gave me the company's top resources. Don't worry, I won't let him down." The cold wind howled outside. Sincere stood at the door, watching the cheerful pair in the living room, and suddenly felt like an outsider. Chapter 7. The first time Victoria brought Sincere to her family's home to announce their marriage, it was because he had pushed her to do it. The moment the words were out, her father, Richard Rothwell, was the first to object. "How many times are you going to get burned by the Clark family? Their family is nothing compared to ours. I don't approve of this marriage, and I never will." Her mother, Eleanor, tearfully questioned her. What kind of spell has the Clark family cast on my daughter? First the older brother, and now the younger one. A perfectly good family dinner had been shattered. After they got home, Victoria looked at Sincere's guilty face and sneered, "You forced this perfectly good dinner into a disaster. Are you satisfied now?" A few days later, Victoria went street racing on the mountain roads with her friends. That was the day of her accident. Outside the emergency room, Mr. and Mrs. Rothwell cried inconsolably, repeating over and over that as long as Victoria was safe, they would let her do whatever she wanted. Sincere pulled himself back from his thoughts and looked at the two of them chatting. "I'm leaving now." Only then did Victoria realize she had ignored him again. She stood up and blocked his path. "Where are you going? I thought we were living together." Sincere reached out and gently patted her head, smiling as he replied, "We're not married yet. How can we live together? That would just give people something to talk about." Victoria was about to say something else, but Ethan interrupted from behind her. "Sis Vicky, I think he's right. You wouldn't want him to become the laughingstock of our circle for being a freeloader, would you?" Sincere's gaze went past Victoria to Ethan. Seeing his smug smile, Sincere couldn't help but find him childish. In the end, Victoria didn't try to make him stay. The next day, and the day after that, Sincere came to Victoria's house as promised to look at wedding dress designs with her. Invitations were sent to friends and family. Everything was going smoothly. Victoria's heart was finally at ease. She also noticed that Sincere had become gentler and more accommodating lately, always deferring to her preferences. This made her look forward to their married life with some anticipation. Soon, it was the wedding day. Ethan, who was usually glued to Victoria's side, was nowhere to be seen. Victoria sent him several messages, but they all went unanswered. She clutched her phone, looking distracted. When she met Sincere's gaze, she explained, "Ethan's in a historical drama, and it's really busy. I heard he has wirework scenes, and I'm not sure if he can handle it. He hasn't replied to me all morning. I hope nothing happened." Victoria kept calling Ethan, so busy that she didn't even have time to look up at her groom. Sincere didn't care about Ethan, and had no desire to ask any more questions. With only 2 hours until the ceremony, his mind was consumed with his escape plan. Once the guests started arriving at noon and the crowd grew, he could use the cover to slip away. "What did you say?" Victoria's anxious voice snapped Sincere out of his thoughts. Her words had been a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ethan was in trouble. The director of his film set had called Victoria to say that he'd had an accident during a wire stunt. After hanging up, Victoria grabbed Sincere's hand, her eyes red and her voice rushed. "I'm sorry, Sincere. Ethan had an accident on set. I have to go to him." Sincere asked. Now, Victoria said without hesitation. "I'm so sorry. Can we postpone the wedding?" Realizing how harsh that sounded, Victoria quickly added, "I'll be back by evening at the latest, I promise. Sincere. Will you wait for me?" Now he didn't even need the cover of a crowd. If Victoria wanted to run, he couldn't be happier. "Okay." The moment the word left his lips, even Victoria thought she had misheard. He had agreed so easily, so readily, without the slightest hint of reluctance. Sincere had become the man she had always wanted him to be, and she couldn't help but feel a secret delight. They would be an enviable couple. At that moment, Victoria was more certain of it than ever. "I'm going then." Victoria gathered the skirt of her wedding dress and hurried out. Before leaving the hotel, she paused and looked back. Her groom was still standing there, handsome and dapper in his suit. Sincere would wait for her. As soon as Victoria's car drove off, Sincere slipped into a changing room, swapped his suit for regular clothes, grabbed the suitcase he had prepared, and walked out of the wedding venue. 2 hours later, the wedding had not started on time, and the guests were in a state of confusion. Neither the bride nor the groom was there. Was the wedding postponed? Cancelled? No one knew. Meanwhile, Sincere was standing on the jet bridge at the airport, taking one last look at the city. He threw away his SIM card and everything that didn't belong to him. Then, he walked resolutely into the plane, never to look back again. Chapter 8. The moment she left the wedding venue, Victoria called her family's private doctor and told him to rush to where Ethan was. On the way, her emotions were in turmoil, a sense of anxiety gnawing at her. By the time Victoria arrived, the private doctor was already there. A crowd had formed around Ethan. The doctor managed to squeeze through to examine him, but Ethan suddenly clutched his head and started screaming and struggling. Everyone was startled and stood there, unsure of what to do. Victoria pushed through the crowd to his side. Ethan, as if snapping back to his senses, clung to her hand and refused to let go. Victoria was still thinking about Sincere, whom she had left behind, but she patiently coaxed the man in front of her. "Ethan, let the doctor examine you, okay? Let's see where you're hurt." At her words, Ethan's already pale face turned even whiter, and his eyes darted around nervously. "My leg hurts a little. I think it's injured." Victoria nodded and motioned for the doctor behind her to come forward, but before the doctor's hand could even touch his leg, Ethan recoiled. The doctor said helplessly, "This is just a routine checkup. It won't hurt. If you're really injured, you'll miss the best window for treatment. Please cooperate with us." Seeing Ethan's lack of cooperation, suspicion began to grow in Victoria's mind. Her patience wore thin, and she yelled at him, "Ethan Shaw, stop wasting time and cooperate with the doctor." Her shout echoed across the set, and the director, sensing the tension, quickly used a megaphone to dismiss the crew. Startled by her outburst, Ethan froze. Fearing he would anger her further, he extended his leg for the doctor to examine. After a thorough check, the doctor found no injuries on Ethan whatsoever. Victoria belatedly realized she had been deceived by such a cheap lie. Fury welled up inside her, especially when she thought of Sincere's understanding and tolerance earlier that day. She had no time to argue with the man in front of her. She turned and walked toward her car. Seeing this, Ethan scrambled to his feet and chased after her. He linked his arm with hers as he used to. "Sis Vicky, I just wanted to see if you'd forget about your little brother after you got married. I didn't think you still cared about me." Noticing her blank expression, Ethan continued, "There's a new restaurant nearby. Why don't you come have dinner with me?" Before he could finish, Victoria violently shook off his arm. "Get lost," Ethan, who had been leaning on her, lost his balance and stumbled backward. Victoria's voice was cold and filled with disgust, her eyes glaring at him with growing hatred. "Today is my wedding day, and you used this pathetic trick to lure me here. What are your intentions? I told you, even if I get married, you'll still be my brother. Why would you do this?" Ethan sat on the ground, looking at Victoria in disbelief. He was frozen, wanting to explain but finding no words to defend himself. All he could do was watch helplessly as her car drove away. In the car, Victoria was about to call Sincere when her phone rang. It was her father. The moment she answered, Richard Rothwell's furious scolding stunned her. "Where have you been today? Look at the mess you've made of this wedding. What kind of games are you two playing? Are you trying to kill me?" Chapter 9. Victoria knew she was in the wrong, and her voice stammered. "Something came up over here, so the wedding was postponed." On the other end of the line, Richard Rothwell was so angry he nearly fainted, shouting at her without any regard for his image. As he yelled, the car pulled up to the wedding venue. Her father was still ranting, but Victoria hung up without a second thought. She opened the car door, gathered the skirt of her wedding dress, and ran toward the venue. With a glimmer of hope, she pushed open the doors. The hall was empty. The decorations from that morning were gone, and the room was dark. Only a few loose decorations on the floor fluttered in the breeze from the open door. She took out her phone and dialed Sincere's number, only to be met with a cold, mechanical voice. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." She tried again and again, but the result was the same. She hung up and opened her messaging app, sending a series of voice messages to Sincere. "Sincere, are you angry? I know I was out of line today. I'm sorry. Please just answer my message or call me back." What she found strange was that Sincere, who always replied instantly, wasn't answering her calls or messages. Suppressing a growing sense of unease, she told herself he was just angry and giving her the silent treatment. Victoria called an employee in the HR department and asked her to contact Sincere. The colleague sounded puzzled. "Ms. Rothwell, assistant clerk, resigned a while ago." "Didn't you know?" Victoria's breath caught in her throat, her grip on the phone tightening. "What did you say? Resigned? How is that possible?" The colleague sounded even more confused. "Company policy doesn't allow office romances, so assistant Clark resigned on his own initiative 2 weeks ago." Victoria hung up and rushed downstairs. She didn't believe Sincere would resign. She had to go to the company and find out for herself. As she arrived at the office, the phone in her hand rang again. Her heart leaped as she looked at the screen, only to see Ethan's name. Seeing it was him, she tossed the phone to her assistant Chloe. Chloe understood immediately, answered the call, and professionally informed Ethan that Victoria was busy. Victoria opened the door to Sincere's office and found it completely empty. Not even a single pen was left behind. Still refusing to believe what she was seeing, she stumbled into her own office. The moment the door opened, she saw the resignation letter on her desk. She looked at the date in the bottom right corner. It was indeed from 2 weeks ago, stamped on the day of Ethan's birthday. In that instant, she remembered Sincere's expression that morning when he had agreed to postpone the wedding. There was no complaint, no hesitation. In hindsight, she could even detect a hint of anticipation. Then Victoria remembered how everything of his had vanished from their home overnight. Not even a single tie left behind. Sincere's explanation had been that living together before marriage would cause gossip, but they had been living together for 2.5 years. The excuse now seemed incredibly flimsy, and yet, at the time, she hadn't suspected a thing. Victoria frantically picked up the resignation letter. As she turned it over, she saw a few words written on the back. She recognized his handwriting immediately. "Let's break up, Victoria." The 3 words were like daggers stabbing at her heart again and again. Even now she was still in denial, refusing to believe Sincere would leave without a word. She rushed out of the company building, but at the corner she collided with an employee carrying a freshly brewed cup of hot coffee. The scalding coffee spilled all over her expensive wedding dress. The employee, terrified, began to apologize profusely. "I'm so sorry, Miss Rothwell, I'm so sorry." But Victoria didn't even spare him a glance. Her pace quickened until she was running through the company, completely disregarding her image. Back at home, she searched the massive villa for any trace of Sincere. She scoured every room, every corner, even under the sofa. But she found nothing. Sincere had left no clues, making it clear he wanted to sever all ties with her, to never see her again. On the verge of a breakdown, she vaguely remembered him once saying that if this city wasn't his home, he would return to his hometown without hesitation. Victoria couldn't wait another moment. She immediately booked the next flight to S City. Chapter 10. The journey from a city to S City was not short. The flight Sincere was on encountered several patches of turbulence. Due to the weather, the plane had to make an emergency landing in another city. Once the weather stabilized, the plane took off again. This little detour was frustrating for Sincere, who had hoped to get some sleep. By the time the plane landed in S City, it was already 10 o'clock the next night. As soon as he exited the airport, he spotted his parents waiting in the arrivals area. In the cold wind, they huddled together for warmth. Even after decades, their love had not been worn down by the trivialities of life. He pulled his coat tighter and walked toward them. On the way home, his mother chattered endlessly, asking about his life in a city. Sincere just smiled and said he was doing well. No one mentioned Victoria. It was as if she had been completely forgotten. In the car, Sincere received a notification of a large deposit into his bank account. He looked at the account number and vaguely recognized it as his former company's, but he had already resigned. The amount was too large to be a salary. He thought it over but couldn't figure out where the money came from, so he decided to ignore it. Just as the car pulled into the driveway, the front door opened from the inside. A woman with a smiling face stood in the doorway, her beautiful almond-shaped eyes sparkling. She wore an ill-fitting apron and held a spatula. Seeing the suitcase in Sincere's hand, Sophia Miller quickly put down the spatula and came out to help him with his luggage. Sincere stood frozen in the wind, looking at the now unfamiliar face he hadn't seen in over a decade. Snapping out of it, he subtly pulled his suitcase away, rejecting her help with his actions. "Thanks, but I've got it." As he stepped inside, before he could even put down his suitcase, a familiar voice called out, "Sincere, have you missed Auntie Miller all these years?" Sincere looked up in surprise and saw Sophia's mother walking toward him. When they were young, his parents were often away from home, working to make more money. Although they had hired a nanny to take care of the 2 brothers, the nanny was greedy. In an era without surveillance cameras, she would often pocket 90% of the grocery money. Sincere and Caleb's meals were meager, and they were always hungry. Until one day, the scent of braised ribs wafted over from the neighbor's house once again. Sincere, so hungry he was seeing stars, took his little bowl and knocked on the door next door. When the door opened, little Sincere swallowed hard, held up his bowl and asked timidly, "Auntie, can we have a little meat?" After all these years, Auntie Miller was still as gentle as he remembered. Sincere stepped forward and hugged her. "I missed you, and I missed your braised ribs." Everyone present burst into laughter. Mr. Clark invited everyone to sit down, and after the last dish was served, they all began to eat. Sincere hadn't rested well on the plane, and with the layover and turbulence, he was exhausted. All he wanted was to finish dinner quickly and go to bed. But the conversation at the table gradually turned to the topic he dreaded most: marriage. He quickly shoveled a few mouthfuls of rice and was about to put down his bowl and escape when Sophia's father looked at him with a smile. "Sincere, have you met anyone special in a city these past few years?" Caught, Sincere could only nod resignedly. "I did. But she wasn't interested in me." His parents exchanged a look, and then his mother began her persuasion. "You're not getting any younger. You're 28, and you'll be 29 after the new year. It's time to find someone and get married." Sincere looked down and mumbled his agreement, wishing he could disappear. Thankfully, Sophia came to his rescue, allowing him to escape. As the clock struck midnight and everyone left, his mother sat down beside him and asked tentatively, "You don't have any feelings for Sophia at all?" Sincere closed his eyes and sighed, finally revealing the real reason he had been distant with Sophia all these years. "She doesn't like me. She likes my brother." Chapter 11. At the mention of Caleb, his parents' expressions turned sad. Realizing he had brought up a painful subject, Sincere felt a pang of guilt. After his brother's death, he rarely came home. He knew his face would remind his parents of his deceased brother. Lying in bed, Sincere watched the heavy snow falling outside and made a decision. He was an adult now. He couldn't live with his parents forever. At the very least, he needed his own place. He had made a good amount of money working with Victoria in a city over the years. His savings were enough to buy a 4,000-square-foot duplex apartment in the city center of S City with cash. His parents didn't object to his decision and even offered to pay for the renovations. Sincere knew they meant well, but he was fully capable of covering the costs himself, so he politely declined. The process of viewing apartments went smoothly. Sincere was very pleased with the location. At night, the view of the river from the floor-to-ceiling windows was like a flowing painting. The paperwork for the purchase was completed quickly, and all that was left was to find a renovation company. When Sincere returned home, he saw a brand-new luxury car parked in front of his house. The engine was still running, and the tinted windows made it impossible to see who was inside. The car was blocking his driveway. He honked the horn, but the car didn't move. He was in a good mood after buying the apartment, so he wasn't annoyed by the inconsiderate driver. He simply unbuckled his seatbelt and got out to ask them to move. He reached out and tapped on the driver's side window. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his late 40s. "Sir, could you please move your car forward? You're blocking my driveway." The driver looked apologetically toward the back seat. "I'm just the driver. You'll have to talk to my boss." Just as he said that, the back window rolled down. Sincere took a few steps back, and as he was about to speak, he saw Victoria Rothwell's familiar face. His good mood vanished instantly. He never would have imagined she would follow him here. He stood his ground, his voice turning cold. "Please move your car, thank you." Victoria seemed taken aback by his tone, and was at a loss for words. "Sincere, why did you leave without a word? Didn't we agree to just postpone the wedding?" Sincere had no intention of answering her. Seeing that she wasn't going to move the car, he took out his phone and called building security. Victoria got out of the car and grabbed his wrist, her voice soft. "Stop being difficult. Come back with me, okay?" Her voice was thick with congestion. She had probably caught a cold. S City was about 10 degrees colder than a city, so it was normal for her not to be used to it. After telling security that someone would be right over, Sincere hung up. He looked at Victoria and said, "Word by word, we're not married. We're not legally husband and wife. Since we've broken up, as a good ex, you should act like you're dead and stop interfering in my life." Victoria seemed to ignore his words, stubbornly asking, "When did we break up? Are you still angry about the time I asked you to come discuss that deal?" "I had actually already closed it for you, and the money has been transferred to your account. I just wanted to—" Hearing this, Sincere finally understood where that mysterious transfer had come from. He pulled his hand free from her grasp and rubbed his sore wrist. "Oh, really? Then I guess I should thank you, Ms. Rothwell, for closing such a big deal for me." Victoria wanted to say more, but security had already arrived with a tow truck. Sincere had no desire to continue the conversation. He turned to the security guard and said, "This person is not a resident here. Remember her face and don't let her in again." Chapter 12. The security guard nodded and went to talk to Victoria. Sincere got back in his car. A moment later, Victoria got back in hers and the car drove away, disappearing from his sight. When he went inside, his mother approached him awkwardly. "That was Victoria Rothwell outside, wasn't it? She's been waiting out there for hours." Sincere paused in the middle of taking off his coat, then nodded nonchalantly. It was her. His father, with a dark expression, kicked at the pile of cigarettes, alcohol, tea, and expensive supplements on the floor. "To think she'd follow you all the way here." Sincere looked at the pile of expensive gifts and felt a headache coming on. "Victoria brought these?" "Mom, Dad, how could you accept her things? This just makes things even more complicated." His mother now looked troubled as well. "We didn't want to take them, but she insisted. The neighbors were all watching. We couldn't just embarrass a young woman like that." Sincere immediately took out his phone and ordered a courier pickup. He knew Victoria wouldn't take them back if he returned them in person, so he decided to send them to her company for Chloe to sign for. The courier arrived quickly. After they loaded everything into the van, the courier took out his phone. "Cash on delivery or?" "Cash on delivery," Sincere answered without hesitation. After the courier left, Sincere was about to go inside when he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure staggering toward his house. Just then, Sophia Miller from next door opened her door, holding several festive-looking gift boxes, and walked toward him. With her back to Victoria, Sophia smiled and held up the gifts. "It's almost the new year. My mom and I picked these out. There's tea for your dad, skincare for your mom, and your favorite, Sincere, who is she?" An urgent question cut Sophia off. Sincere's gaze went past Sophia to Victoria. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were dazed, and her dry, cracked lips all screamed that she was sick. A spoiled young woman like her rarely got sick, but when she did, it was always severe. Sophia noticed Victoria's condition and kindly reached out to support her, but Victoria shoved her hand away. Even with Sophia's good temper, Victoria's unreasonable behavior was infuriating. Sincere stepped between them. He looked at Victoria, who was clearly at her limit but still refused to go to the hospital. He pulled his coat tighter, his voice cold. "If you don't want to die, you should have your driver take you to the hospital. If you do want to die, don't do it in front of my house. There's a cemetery about 20 miles west of here." With that, he turned and led Sophia, who had brought the gifts, into the house. But before they had taken a few steps, there was a thud behind them. They both turned to see Victoria, who had been struggling to stand just a moment ago, collapsed in the snow, unconscious. In the end, Sincere and Sophia took Victoria to the hospital. After taking her temperature, the doctor's brow furrowed. 103.8. She was close to frying her brain. "Why didn't you bring her in sooner?" They looked at each other and said in unison, "We found her on the side of the road. We don't know her." The doctor's expression softened. He prescribed some medication and had a nurse start and forth. Victoria was still unconscious, and Sincere wanted nothing more to do with her. He took her phone from her pocket and called Chloe Davis. She answered quickly, her voice lazy. "Hello? How's the husband chasing going? Did Sincere's parents kick you out?" Sincere hummed softly. "I wouldn't know. I wasn't home at the time." Chapter 13. There was dead silence on the other end. If the screen didn't still show that the call was connected, Sincere would have thought she'd hung up. Seeing as she wasn't speaking, Sincere broke the silence. "Victoria is sick and in the hospital. You should come and take her back to a city. I'll send you the address." Chloe seemed to snap back to reality, her voice stammering. "Well, what? In the hospital? How? Hey, did you two make up?" Before Chloe could finish, Sincere ended the call. He opened the messaging app and was surprised to see that Victoria had pinned his old account to the top of her chats. He suddenly remembered how, when they first got together, he used to pester her to pin his chat. At the time, annoyed by his persistence, she had frowned at him. "Why are you so obsessed with this?" "I never pin anyone." Seeing the seriousness and impatience in her eyes, Sincere never brought it up again. He looked down at the message below his name. "Are you leaving me?" It was clearly from Victoria. His finger slid across the screen as he searched for Chloe's chat. Just as he was about to hit send, a call came in. And in a stroke of bad luck, his finger, aiming for the send button, hit the green answer key instead. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Ethan Shaw. The person on the other end anxiously called Victoria's name several times. After a moment's hesitation, Sincere decided to tell him the truth. He spoke into the phone. "Stop yelling. Victoria's sick. She's lying in bed unconscious right now. Oh, and if you have time, you and Chloe are welcome to come to S City and pick her up. The person on the other end of the line instantly fell silent. It seemed like everyone was fond of silence today, as if it could solve everything. Sincere promptly hung up, placed the phone beside Victoria, and turned to Sophia, who had been quiet all this time. She's Victoria Rothwell, right? Sincere nodded. He wasn't surprised she knew her name. Back then, the two of them had pursued Caleb with such intensity that Victoria even flew back and forth every week. Although Caleb and Sophia didn't go abroad together, Caleb's social media often featured photos of them together. Given Victoria's temper, they had likely not only met but also fought. Once, Victoria had returned from abroad with bruises all over her arms. Although they weren't serious, the marks were suspicious. At the time, he was just an assistant and knew better than to ask about his boss's affairs. He had simply followed Chloe's instructions and bought some ointment for Victoria. Richard Rothwell had given Victoria a piece of his mind over the incident, and poor Chloe had been caught in the crossfire. After they got home, Sincere paused at his front door. There were some things he felt he needed to clear up with Sophia. Sophia, standing beside him, saw him hesitate and was momentarily confused. He turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. "I think we need to be clear with each other." Sophia looked down slightly, watching him quietly. "What do you want to say?" Sincere took a deep breath. "If you're like Victoria, using me as a substitute for my brother, then this pointless game can end right now. I am not a replacement for anyone. I am just Sincere Clark. I'm not as outstanding as my brother, able to study abroad, never lacking for admirers. I'm a very ordinary person, and my life doesn't need to be that exciting." Sophia's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Is that what this is about?" Sincere didn't answer. The thought had been weighing on him for a long time, but he had never found the right moment to say it. But Sophia's reaction was strange. She didn't seem embarrassed at being found out. Instead, she seemed relieved. Her gaze rested on him, a clear smile in her eyes. "Sincere, I've never seen you as a substitute for anyone, because the one I like is you." Sophia seemed to think her words would move him, but instead, Sincere reacted like a startled cat, shouting at her. "Stop lying," he didn't give her a chance to argue. He pushed open the garden gate, shutting her out, and then slammed it behind him without looking back. Sophia stood there, stunned, watching his retreating figure. Chapter 14. For the next few days, Sincere didn't leave the house. Victoria didn't show up again either. She had probably gone back to a city with Chloe. After his confrontation with Sophia, she stopped coming over. Mr. Clark couldn't stand it anymore. He took a sip of tea and looked at Sincere, who was flipping through channels on the TV. "You really don't have feelings for Sophia? You know, she's a real catch. There are plenty of young men at her company chasing after her. We have the advantage of being neighbors. You shouldn't waste this opportunity." Sincere just hummed in response, a non-committal reply. Mr. and Mrs. Clark exchanged a look. Mrs. Clark walked over with a few documents. "Sincere, your Auntie Zhao showed us the profiles of a few girls your age today. I've already screened them for you. They're all nice girls. You're not getting any younger. It's time to find a partner. You can't let one bad apple like Victoria spoil the whole bunch." Sincere had heard this speech so many times in the past few days that his ears were ringing. To avoid further lectures, he took the documents from his mother, pretended to study them for a few minutes, and then agreed. All right, I'll go on a blind date tomorrow. Are you two happy now?" Seeing that they were finally making progress, the worried expressions on his parents' faces relaxed. The next day, as Sincere was leaving, he ran into Auntie Miller, who was in a hurry. After they greeted each other, Sincere asked, "Auntie, where are you off to in such a rush?" Mrs. Miller looked at the file in her hand with a slight headache. "Sophia left an urgent document for a meeting at home. I have to take it to her." Sincere nodded. "Then I won't keep you." Mrs. Miller paused with her hand on the car door. A sly smile appeared on her face as she turned to Sincere. "Sincere, where are you heading? My leg has been acting up these past few days, so driving might be a bit difficult." She even bent down and rubbed her knee, looking pained. Sincere checked the location on his phone. "I'm going to the Sweetwood Café on Zhenjiang Avenue." Mrs. Miller could barely contain her smile. She bent down again, rubbing her leg. "Oh, that cafe is right downstairs from Sophia's office. Why don't you take this to her for me?" Sincere had no excuse to refuse. He took the file from her, and without wasting any time drove to Sophia's office building. He had never been to her company and didn't know which floor her office was on. After a moment's hesitation, he walked to the front desk. "Hello. Could you please give this file to Sophia Miller?" The receptionist took the file and, seeing the special marking in the top right corner, looked surprised. "Could I have your name and phone number, please?" Sincere didn't think much of it. He wrote down his name and number on the paper she handed him and gave back the pen. He was 3 minutes late to the cafe. Feeling guilty, he apologized profusely as he sat down. "I'm so sorry, something unexpected came up on the way, so I'm a few minutes late." The woman across from him tapped her fingers on the table, looking impatient. All right, let's skip the pleasantries. Do you have a car? What kind? A house? How big? Where is it? How many past relationships? What's your education level? How much do you have in savings? What's your monthly salary? Oh, and most importantly, my mother has mobility issues and needs someone around the clock, so I don't plan on working. After we get married, you'll have to hand over your entire salary every month, and household expenses can't be less than $5,000. Of course, since I'll be taking care of my mom, I can't be expected to do things like laundry, cooking, and raising children. Sincere had to reevaluate the demure-looking woman in front of him. You really can't judge a book by its cover. He had to interrupt her. He took out his phone and looked at the photo he had taken of her profile that morning. Hold on, Miss Jones. I don't think we're at that stage yet, and I certainly haven't said I'm going to marry you." The woman's expression immediately soured. She sat up straight and adjusted her designer jacket. "What? Are my conditions not good enough for you? Let me tell you, you men have no ambition, yet you have the nerve to be picky." Chapter 15. "I've seen your profile. No car, no house, living with your parents. I hear you struggled in a city for years, earned nothing, and came crawling back to S City. Now you're just a moocher, living off your parents. Am I wrong? And with your situation, you think you can marry up?" As she spoke, she sprayed spittle, forcing Sincere to stand up to avoid her verbal assault. Sincere was so infuriated by this bizarre woman that he almost laughed. "Are you delusional? If you don't have a mirror at home, surely you have a toilet. Is your reflection matte finished or something?" He tried to leave, but the woman chased after him and blocked his way. "You freeloader, you have the nerve to insult me. If I don't teach you a lesson now, you'll be walking all over me after we're married." As she spoke, she raised her hand to strike him. Sincere sidestepped her, but she lost her footing and stumbled, falling into a nearby table. The dipping sauces on the table overturned, splashing all over her cream-colored jacket in a comical display of red and green. Sincere ignored the ridiculous woman and walked toward the door, only to collide with someone who was just coming in. A familiar scent of roses mixed with the faint smell of hospital disinfectant. He looked down in surprise and met Victoria Rothwell's gaze. Victoria's once dull eyes lit up the moment she saw him. Before she could speak, the woman covered in sauce rushed up from behind. The woman glared at Sincere, spewing insults, and even reached out to grab him. Victoria quickly stepped in front of Sincere. Her voice, still raspy from her illness, was nevertheless commanding. "If you have something to say, say it to me." The sound of hurried footsteps came from behind. Sincere turned to see Chloe and Ethan running toward them, followed by a dozen bodyguards. The woman was a head shorter than Victoria and was already intimidated. She looked at Victoria, then at Sincere behind her, and sneered. "So he's just a kept pretty boy. No wonder he doesn't have a job. This pretty boy got my new clothes all dirty. This jacket cost over $1,000. I demand 10 times the compensation," the woman yelled with great conviction, as if she wouldn't back down. Hearing the insults, Victoria's gaze turned icy. "What did you call him?" The woman, oblivious to the danger she was in, continued to shout. "This is between me and the pretty boy. What's it to you? Don't think I'm afraid of you." Before she could finish, Victoria slapped her across the face. The woman was no pushover, and the two immediately started fighting. Sincere and the newly arrived Chloe rushed to pull them apart. Victoria, still recovering from her illness, was at a disadvantage despite her height. Chloe stood between them, trying to mediate. "Stop fighting, let's talk this out." Ethan, following behind Chloe, was pacing anxiously, wringing his hands. "Sis Vicky, are you okay? Are you hurt?" Seeing a scratch on Victoria's hand, he couldn't hold back any longer and turned to blame Sincere. "I thought you left. Why are you back in her life again?" If you're going to leave, then leave for good. Stop playing these cheap, hard-to-get games. Sincere knew he was the cause of this mess and couldn't just walk away. He wanted to handle the situation, but Ethan's whining was getting on his nerves. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. Cry, cry, cry. Why is a grown man crying all the time? Are you good for anything else? Oh, right. You are good for something else, like being the other man. At those words, Ethan's face turned pale, a hint of hatred in his eyes. Sincere ignored him and turned his attention to the woman now sitting on the floor holding her face. Meeting his gaze, the woman flinched. It seemed Victoria had really scared her. He looked down at her. I can compensate you for the original price of the clothes on one condition: you apologize to me. If you insist on 10 times the compensation, then we'll call the police and let them handle it. The woman wasn't a fool. She had probably guessed that Victoria was someone important, either rich or from a powerful family. Either way, she couldn't afford to offend her. So she stood up, holding her face, and mumbled an apology to Sincere. I'm sorry. Although there was no sincerity in her tone, Sincere didn't care. After the money was transferred, the woman limped out of the cafe, satisfied. Sincere then turned back to face Victoria. Chloe, realizing they needed some space, tactfully led Ethan away. Before he left, Ethan shot Sincere a venomous look, as if he wanted to tear him apart. During the fight, the potted plants and decorations outside the cafe had been damaged. An employee was on the phone, calling the manager to assess the damages. It seemed like they had never had a proper conversation like this before. Sincere didn't know what to say. The silence stretched on until Sincere finally broke it. You're not hurt, are you? Victoria suppressed her excitement and calmly shook her head. No. She paused, then asked tentatively, who was that woman? Sincere answered without hesitation, a blind date my family set up. Chapter 16. Victoria's lips pressed together tightly, her furrowed brow betraying her anxiety. Sincere hesitated for a long time before finally deciding to tell Victoria about the picture frame he had accidentally broken. But he left out the part about seeing Caleb's photo. It took Victoria a moment to remember which frame he was talking about. She was about to say it was fine when she suddenly remembered the other photo tucked behind it. She was a smart woman. With just one clue, she could unravel the whole truth. In an instant, she understood why Sincere had left. He knew she had been using him as a substitute for his own brother. From Sincere's perspective, it must have been a devastating realization. I'm sorry. Perhaps her apology was too abrupt. Sincere was taken aback when he heard it. After a moment, he smiled, a smile of release. It's okay. It's all in the past. She wanted to say more, but the cafe owner rushed in. Chloe intercepted the owner, who was heading toward Victoria, and generously took out her phone. Victoria knew that if she wanted to salvage their relationship, she had to do something. So she looked at Sincere, her gaze incredibly earnest. Sincere, give me a chance to win you back. I was wrong before, terribly wrong. I want to fix this. A flicker of surprise crossed Sincere's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of resignation. He looked down. You don't have to, Victoria. We're fine like this, not bothering each other. If possible, I really hope we never see each other again. Just as he finished speaking, Sincere saw Sophia standing at the entrance. She didn't look like she was there for coffee. She looked like she was looking for someone. Sophia's eyes scanned the cafe, and when they landed on Sincere, a gentle smile graced her face. She walked toward him with determination. I'm done with my work. Shall we go home? She said it so naturally, as if he had been waiting there for her. Sincere had no desire to stay any longer, so he stood up. Seeing Victoria's eyes redden and her hesitant expression, he still said his goodbyes. I'm leaving now. Victoria nodded reluctantly, a hoarse okay barely escaping her throat. When Sincere reached his car and was about to open the door, he noticed Sophia following him. He was puzzled. You didn't drive? Sophia shook her head. My car had a little accident this morning. The insurance company towed it for repairs. You wouldn't be so heartless as to leave me stranded, would you? She was his neighbor, after all. Leaving her behind would be hard to explain to her mother. He tossed her the car keys and walked around to the passenger side. You drive. Sophia caught the keys and happily ran to the driver's seat. Okay. In the car, Sophia asked tentatively, I hear you were on a blind date today? Thinking of that bizarre woman, Sincere rubbed his temples. Yes, I was. Did it go well? Oh, it went great. So great that a fight broke out. I don't know where my mom found that weirdo. She said she screened her. I can't believe I fell for that." Hearing Sincere's endless complaints about the unsuccessful date, Sophia's expression shifted slightly, the corners of her mouth turning up in an almost imperceptible smile. When they got home, Sophia held out her hand to him. Sincere looked at her confused. "What's this for? We've been back for a while now, but we still haven't added each other on our messaging apps." Sophia dragged out the last word, her tone almost flirtatious. Sincere couldn't refuse. They exchanged contact information and went their separate ways. Back home, Sincere collapsed on the sofa, trying to clear his head. Hearing him come in, his parents rushed over, eager to hear about the date. When they heard how rude the woman had been, his mother was in disbelief. "How could your Auntie Zhao introduce someone like that to you? Are you sure you didn't meet the wrong person?" Chapter 17. Sincere pointed to the headshot on the profile. "How could I be wrong? It was her. The photo is identical to her in person." His mother, feeling guilty, quickly handed him another profile. "Forget about that weirdo. What about this one? She has a car, a house, and she even studied abroad." For the next few days, his parents took turns, constantly studying the thick stack of blind date profiles. Soon, Sincere's 29th birthday arrived, the day before New Year's Eve. Other than his parents and the Miller family, he didn't know anyone in S City. And since Sophia had gone on a business trip a few days ago, throwing a big birthday party seemed like too much trouble. So he decided to treat it like any other day. But when he stepped out of his house, he saw Victoria, who had been waiting there for who knows how long. She had been waiting for a while, holding a cake from the bakery in a city that Sincere used to love. To ensure the cake was as fresh and delicious as the one in a city, Victoria had paid a hefty price to bring the bakery's pastry chef to S City. The moment she saw Sincere, she waved at him. Sincere, happy birthday. Sincere stared at the cake in her hands, momentarily stunned. He had never imagined Victoria would celebrate his birthday. In the past, she always had an excuse. The first year they were together, she had told him with a troubled expression that she had to go on a business trip and couldn't celebrate with him. The second year, she had drunk so much that she ended up in the hospital with a stomach bleed, and Sincere had spent his birthday by her side. The third year, she had finally ordered him a cake, but the name on it was wrong. It was his brother's name. That was the first time they had a major fight, and it was after that incident that Sincere began to suspect she was still not over his brother. But the small seed of doubt had been quickly extinguished by her sincere apology. In short, in the past 3 years, they had never once properly celebrated his birthday together. Victoria was still standing at his door, the cold wind stinging her face, but she didn't give up. She was waiting for his answer. Sincere put his slightly frozen hands in his pockets, looked at her earnest expression, sighed inwardly, and walked toward her. "What are you doing here?" Victoria held the cake out to him. "I came to celebrate your birthday. This is the cake you used to love, and I've also booked a private room at that restaurant downtown." Sincere interrupted her. "Let's go." Some things had to be said face to face. Victoria was a stubborn person. Once she set her mind on something, she wouldn't give up. The food at the restaurant wasn't particularly good, but the ambiance was nice, the service was excellent, and it was located in the heart of S City, so the prices were steep. As soon as they sat down, the exquisitely plated but bland dishes began to arrive. Sincere wasn't there to eat, and he had no intention of picking up his chopsticks. Victoria opened the cake box and lit the candles. Sincere glanced at the name on the cake. This time, it was correct, but the feeling was gone. Victoria stood up and turned off the lights in the room, plunging them into darkness. Only the flames of the candles danced in the dark, occasionally sputtering with a bright spark. Victoria's voice was soft. "Sincere, make a wish." Sincere clasped his hands together and slowly closed his eyes. A few seconds later, he opened them and blew out the candles. Victoria was about to turn on the lights, but he stopped her. "Do you know what I wished for?" Victoria shook her head in the darkness, then realized he couldn't see her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I wish that we would never see each other again." Chapter 18. Sincere's voice was light, like a feather brushing against Victoria's heart, but the words were devastating. She couldn't bear the weight of them. She opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. "Victoria, don't talk yet, just listen to me. We're the same age. When we met in college, I knew you were the one for me from the first moment I saw you, but when I watched you do everything for my brother, I told myself I couldn't compete with him. so I hid my feelings well. I never told anyone I liked you. Later, my brother went abroad, and I graduated. I thought you would go with him, but you didn't. I learned from him that you two had a huge fight about it, so bad that you were barely speaking. When I found out you weren't leaving, I did everything I could to get into your company, going through 3 rounds of interviews and beating out countless other candidates. When I finally stood before you as your assistant, I realized you still hadn't gotten over my brother. Your desk drawer was full of boarding passes for international flights, and your office lounge was filled with gifts you intended to give him. I thought that maybe this love wasn't meant for me, and I was about to give up. Then you came to my desk and asked me to be with you. I said yes without hesitation. I didn't know what love was, but every time you pushed me away in frustration, I learned that it wasn't love. It was disgust. I thought my sincerity could win you over, but I never imagined you were just using me as a substitute for my brother. Victoria, you made me a traitor to my own brother. Victoria felt as if something had struck her heart with tremendous force. For a moment, she couldn't even speak. She had never looked at things from Sincere's perspective. Thinking back on his years of tolerance and patience, she felt as if 1,000 arrows had pierced her heart. She forced a smile which, in the darkness, looked defeated and full of regret. I'm sorry. I never thought things would turn out this way. Sincere stood up in the darkness. I should go. Before he had taken a few steps, the closed door was suddenly pushed open from the outside. The lights flickered on, so bright that he had to squint. Sincere Clark, who do you think you are? Victoria has humbled herself like this. So what are you still pretending to be so high and mighty for? An angry female voice came from the doorway. Sincere immediately recognized her. On Ethan's birthday, she was the one who had smashed the cake in his face and then laughed about it. Ethan emerged from behind her, leaning against the doorframe with a sneer. Yeah, I don't know brand of plastic bag he is to be so full of himself. Victoria snapped at them. Who let you in? Get out, wait. As everyone watched in confusion, Sincere picked up a knife and cut the cake into several pieces. He looked at the 2 people in the doorway, holding a piece of cake in each hand, and walked toward them. Thinking about what he was about to do, a smile unconsciously spread across his face. It's my birthday today. Have some cake. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to disdain. Well, you do have some manners. Before she could finish, Sincere shoved the cake in their faces. Chapter 19. As the sticky cream covered their faces, Sincere smiled and said, You're not mad, are you? Oh, it's my fault for not telling you sooner. You see, getting cream on my face is a birthday tradition of mine. I hope you don't mind. He mimicked Ethan's playful tone from that day, returning the words to them verbatim. Ethan stood frozen, seemingly not expecting Sincere to retaliate in this way. The woman's anger ignited, her eyes blazing. Just as she was about to make a move, Victoria stepped in front of Sincere. She looked at them calmly. Don't cause a scene, you owe him this. The woman glared at Victoria, but intimidated by her, didn't dare say anything more. She shot Sincere a venomous look and turned to leave. Seeing her go, Ethan knew that staying would only bring more ridicule, so he quickly followed her out. Watching them leave, Victoria picked up her bag from the back of the chair. Let me give you a ride home. Sincere didn't refuse, he hadn't driven. When they arrived at his house, they sat in silence. Sincere unbuckled his seatbelt and got out. Before closing the door, he looked into Victoria's dark eyes and said, Victoria, go back to a city, don't come here again. Victoria didn't nod or shake her head. She just sat there, quietly looking at the man who had followed her for 3 years. She looked at him, her eyes gradually welling up. Happy New Year in advance. Sincere nodded. As he closed the door, he thought he heard her choke back a sob. He must have misheard. A proud, spoiled woman like Victoria would never cry for him. New Year's Eve. After dinner, as Sincere was helping his mother with the dishes, he heard Sophia calling from outside. Through the window, he saw her, her eyes sparkling, a smile on her lips, holding a handful of fireworks and waving them at him. Sincere, come out and set off fireworks with me. Sincere was about to refuse, but his father encouraged him. Go on. It's only for a few days a year that we get to have some fun. They went to an open, quiet area. Sincere didn't actually like fireworks. When he was a child, he and Caleb went to the river to set off fireworks. A boy their age loved to throw fireworks at people. The boy would point and laugh at the terrified people. Sincere's luck had never been good, and he had unfortunately become the boy's next target. When the firework exploded near him, he ran away in terror, only to be met with the boy's mocking laughter. Caleb had angrily confronted the boy, but the boy's parents had pushed him to the ground. After that, Sincere had never liked the beautiful but dangerous things. Fortunately, the fireworks Sophia had bought were the small, safe kind for children. Sophia lit one and held it out to him. "Want to try?" Sincere gathered his courage and reached for the burning firework, but the moment the slightly warm wire touched his fingers, he pulled his hand back. The firework quickly burned out in Sophia's hand. He still couldn't get over his fear. He said guiltily, "I'm sorry." Sophia wasn't angry. She just smiled and shook her head, then took out another firework and handed it to him. As Sophia's lighter got closer, Sincere's hand began to tremble uncontrollably. Suddenly, a series of loud bangs erupted nearby. They looked up to see a dozen fireworks shooting into the sky, exploding into a dazzling display. "Sincere, these fireworks are for you." Victoria's voice came from the darkness. Behind her were Ethan, Chloe, and a dozen bodyguards. Chapter 20. Even from a distance, Sincere could feel the intense hatred radiating from Ethan. What was he so angry about? Was it the cake in the face yesterday, or the fact that tonight's fireworks weren't for him? Sincere couldn't figure it out, and he didn't want to. Victoria had actually been waiting outside his house for a while, but he was still having dinner. She knew his parents didn't like her, so she had waited for the right moment. But she hadn't expected Sophia to beat her to it. The brilliant fireworks continued to bloom, but Sincere had no interest in watching them. He took a deep breath, his brow furrowed. "Victoria, you really don't have to go to all this trouble for me." Victoria cut him off anxiously. "Yes, I do. I want to win you back. I know I did a lot of things to hurt you in the past, so now I want a chance to make it up to you. Please, just give me a chance." Chloe, looking helpless, stepped up beside her. "She's a young woman who ran all over S City in the cold, just to show you a few minutes of fireworks. What's the harm in giving her a chance? Besides, you used to be the one who—" Sincere cut Chloe off. "You said it yourself, used to be. What does the past have to do with now? I don't need her. I've finally moved on. Why do you all keep trying to drag me back?" The darkness obscured their faces, so they couldn't see his frustration and desperation. They just kept throwing the past at him. After Sincere's outburst, a dead silence fell over the group, broken only by the sound of the wind and their breathing. Sophia thought this group was being ridiculous. Every time she and Sincere were together, they would show up and ruin the mood. Her voice was full of impatience. "Sincere doesn't like you. He doesn't like a city, and he doesn't want to go back with you. If you really care about him, then please, don't ever show up in front of him again." With that, she took Sincere's hand and turned to leave. But before they had gone far, a commotion erupted behind them. Chloe's terrified voice cried out, "Ethan, you psycho! Have you lost your mind, Victoria? Look out!" They turned to see a dark figure rushing toward them. The sound of fireworks exploded around Sincere again. He quickly pulled Sophia into his arms, covered her ears, and ran to the side. Someone had kicked over the firework box, and it was now shooting in another empty direction. When the box was empty and silence returned, Victoria's faint groan reached their ears. Her back had been burned by the fireworks. By the time she got to the hospital, the wound was still bleeding. Ethan was detained by the bodyguards, waiting for Victoria to get out of surgery. Chloe was busy calling Victoria's family to explain the situation. Sincere and Sophia, who had been in front, had no idea what had happened. Sophia was still shaken. Sincere stood beside her, holding her trembling hand. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Ethan glared at Sincere, hating that he hadn't been faster in lighting the fuse. If he had, Sincere's face would have been disfigured. He let out a derisive laugh. When all eyes were on him, he finally spoke. Chapter 21. "I really don't understand what's so charming about your Clark family. Victoria and I grew up together. Why did she change completely after meeting you two brothers? Sincere Clark, I lit those fireworks tonight. I wanted to see your face destroyed. I wanted to see if Victoria loved you for your face or for you. I never expected her to save you. It's a pity I was too slow. If I had been faster, you would be the one in the operating room right now." With that, he let out a deranged mix of laughter and sobs that was truly unsettling. Sincere had never understood why Ethan was so obsessed with Victoria. The Rothwell family had set him up in their company, given him starring roles with A-list actors, and provided him with endless resources and luxury brand endorsements. He never had to schmooze investors for funding. Why wasn't he satisfied with all that? When Chloe returned from her call and heard what he had said, she was furious. She pointed at him, her voice seething. "I told you not to come, but you insisted. And when you did, I had one rule: stay out of their business. Now look at the mess you've made. Just wait and see how the Rothwells deal with you." One would think the threat of the Rothwell family would make him back down, but he just laughed, as if he had nothing left to lose. Chloe couldn't stand the sight of him and had the bodyguards take him away. Then she turned her attention to Sincere and Sophia. Her voice was still tinged with anger. "You two should go home. I'll take care of Victoria." Sophia gave her phone number. "This is my number. Call me if you need anything." It was late when they got home. Sincere's parents were already asleep. Before he went inside, Sophia stopped him. Sincere turned, caught off guard by the intensity in her eyes. He looked away, his voice flustered. "What is it?" Sophia's voice was serious. "What I said, it was all true." Sincere was confused. What was true? During her business trip, Sophia had been completely distracted. Watching Victoria's aggressive attempts to win Sincere back had made her anxious. She had planned to tell him everything tonight, but their plans had been derailed. "It's true that I like you. I never liked Caleb. After the college entrance exams, I asked Caleb to give you a letter. Do you remember?" She looked at him expectantly, but his expression only grew more confused. He frowned. "What letter?" She grew agitated, gesturing with her hands. It was a light blue envelope with a moon-shaped wax seal. "You didn't get it? How is that possible?" "Caleb said he gave it to you." Sincere could see she wasn't joking, which only confused him more. He had never received a light blue letter. After washing up, Sincere lay in bed, unable to shake the strange feeling he got from Sophia's words. Should he believe her? But why would his brother hide something from him? His thoughts were a tangled mess. On a whim, he got out of bed, threw on a robe, and went to his brother's room. Nothing in Caleb's room had been touched. It was just as he had left it. He turned on the light and began to search for the light blue envelope. After a long search, he finally found it, tucked between the pages of a book, its edges yellowed with age. Chapter 22. The envelope felt heavy in his hand. He carefully tore it open. The 10-year-old letter saw the light of day again. It was filled with Sophia's frustration and conflict over her family's decision to send her abroad. At the end, she had written, "If you're willing to come abroad with me, meet me at the old spot on June 10th at 7:30 p.m. I'll be waiting." An invitation from 10 years ago, which he was only seeing now. He didn't know how long she had waited for him that night, only that after that she had become cold and distant, even sarcastic to him in front of others. They had inexplicably become enemies. When he found out she was going abroad, he had angrily confronted her. "You're leaving, and you didn't tell me?" At the time, she had rolled her eyes at him. "I don't like you. Why should I tell you?" Sincere had pressed on. "Then who do you like?" "My brother?" She had impatiently closed her book and gone inside, shouting over her shoulder, "Yes, I like anyone but you." Her refusal to communicate had made him feel she was being completely unreasonable. So when she left, he hadn't gone to the airport to see her off. Over time, his love for her had turned to resentment. He had forced himself to forget the good times, leaving only the memory of her resolute back. To think that the cause of all this misunderstanding was his own brother. No one knew why Caleb had hidden the letter. Perhaps only Caleb himself knew. The next afternoon, Sincere received a message from Sophia. Chloe had told her that Victoria was out of surgery awake, and that Richard Rothwell had arrived at the hospital. When Sincere and Sophia arrived, they overheard Richard Rothwell saying he was cutting off all of Ethan's resources, suspending his luxury brand endorsements, and removing his name from the guest lists of upcoming red carpet events. Furthermore, he planned to sue Ethan for intentional assault, which could land him in jail for anywhere from a few months to several years. Having offended the Rothwells, Ethan's career was over. After the bodyguards led the defiant Ethan away, Sincere and Sophia entered the room. The anesthesia had worn off, and Victoria was lying on her stomach. The prolonged position was uncomfortable, but any slight movement sent a searing pain through her back, causing her to break out in a cold sweat. Sincere was still a little intimidated by the Rothwells. The last time they had met, he had been forcing Victoria to take him home to discuss their marriage. He would probably never forget Richard Rothwell shouting, "I don't approve." The room was silent for a long time, until Richard Rothwell finally broke the silence. "I don't know what happened between you two, and I don't want to know. No one has told me the truth about what happened on the wedding day. All I know is that on the wedding day, the groom was gone, the bride was gone, and the venue was in chaos. If you still want to come back, we can pick a new date and have another wedding." If he had said this on the day Sincere had gone to their house, Sincere would have jumped for joy. But now Victoria secretly watched Sincere's expression. Seeing him unmoved by the offer, she knew it was over between them. Hearing this, Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She clenched her fists, her eyes filled with a hint of hostility as she looked at Richard Rothwell. But this wasn't what Sincere wanted to hear. He had told Victoria not to come back, but she had never listened. Sincere turned and slowly took the hand of the person standing behind him. He could feel Sophia's fingers trembling. After a brief moment of surprise, she squeezed his hand back. Chapter 23. Mr. Rothwell, my family's business has been declining these past few years. We're not exactly a good match. Besides, I've already found the person I truly love. I won't be going back. In all his years in the business world, Sincere was probably the first person to reject Richard Rothwell. But thinking of how his beloved daughter had risked her life for this man multiple times, he pressed on. "Weren't you the one who wanted to get married in the first place? Why are you backing out now?" Sincere's reply was calm and respectful. "First, our marriage was not a business alliance. Even if I back out now, there are no losses. Second, I was not the first one to back out of the wedding. I believe Victoria knows the reasons better than anyone." For the first time, Richard Rothwell was left speechless. Victoria called out to him, "Dad, stop it, let them go." Sincere's words were like a hammer, each one striking her heart. She kept her head down, unwilling to watch him leave. She didn't want to accept it, but she had to. When Sincere led her out of the hospital, Sophia still felt like she was in a daze. She squeezed his hand, standing there like an excited child. "Sincere, what you just said, was it true?" Sincere nodded without hesitation. The two had reconciled, and no one was happier than the Miller family. No one else knew that in her first year abroad, Sophia had been quiet and withdrawn, often just staring at her phone in a daze. Later, she had hurriedly bought a ticket back home, only to be told that Sincere had gone to a university. She had stubbornly followed him to a university, wanting an explanation. She didn't understand why he hadn't been willing to go abroad with her. That night, she had waited from dusk till dawn. As she watched the sunrise, she had returned home, exhausted. After a sleepless night, she had gone to a university and seen Sincere. Just as she was about to greet him, she saw him staring intently at another woman. After that, Sophia never returned home, until she heard from her parents that Sincere was getting married. She had said she didn't care, but her actions betrayed her. She had bought a ticket back to S City that same day. When she arrived, she learned that Sincere was planning to run away from his wedding, and she finally smiled. Their wedding was set for April 27th. Sophia looked at the calendar, marveling at how quickly the day was approaching. This time, Sincere was not neglected. The two families often gathered in the yard to discuss wedding details, their laughter echoing through the air. Their parents would tease them with stories from their childhood, leaving them blushing. Sincere's new house was in the final stages of decoration. He and Sophia spent their days picking out furniture and decor. If Sophia liked something, she would buy it without a second thought, whether it matched or not. The night before the wedding, Sincere returned from the newly decorated house and ran into his new next-door neighbor. The neighbor was a man in his 50s or 60s. The house had been empty for as long as Sincere could remember. He had heard that the owner had been living abroad and had only recently returned. He smiled and greeted Sincere. Sincere replied politely, and the man said, "Around the new year there was always a girl standing, next to my house, looking at your room. Rain or shine, she was there. At first I thought she was some kind of stalker, but then I realized you two knew each other, but I haven't seen her around lately." Sincere's hand paused on the doorknob. He already knew the answer. He smiled and explained, "She won't be coming back anymore." Sincere and Sophia's wedding was a grand affair. A red carpet and flowers lined the path from the entrance of the residential complex. Victoria stood in the same spot as before. She saw Sincere in his well-tailored suit, his eyes filled with love as he looked at his bride. Amidst the cheerful music, they got into the wedding car. Her legs moved on their own, chasing after them for a few steps before she forced herself to stop. She knew she had no right. April 27th was a bright, sunny day, but the sun was glaring. The light brought tears to her eyes. She lowered her head and rubbed her eyes, but the tears only fell faster. The Clark's house was empty. Everyone was at the wedding. Victoria got into her car. When she arrived at the wedding venue, she sat in the car and took out an envelope, slipping a bank card inside. She had thought for a long time about what to write, but there were too many things she wanted to say. An envelope was too small to contain all her regret and apologies. Finally, she picked up a pen and wrote on the envelope, "Happy Wedding." Then she took out her phone and ordered a delivery service. "Take this envelope to the gift registry at the wedding. Record the whole thing on video. When you get back, I'll give you a $10,000 tip." The delivery person was stunned. He couldn't believe how easy the job was. His hand trembled as he took the envelope. "Who should I say it's from?" Victoria was silent for a moment, then forced a smile. "Just say, a former colleague." After everything was done, she boarded a flight back to a city. On the plane, she replayed the video from the delivery person over and over. Her vision blurred, and a tear fell onto the phone screen. What is the end of love? Is it the sudden disappearance of novelty, the cold shoulder, impatience, slander, letting go, acceptance, or never seeing each other again? No one could give a definite answer. From now on, they would go their separate ways. She and Sincere Clark would never meet again.